Inasmuch as, again, I will say that some of you enjoy having these never to be used ad hoc names and descriptions for this, at least for this Wednesday, I got a new one for you. What if this was called the Universal Rebellion? And if somebody doing this was called a universal rebel, instead of all sorts of other little names I've thrown out and descriptions. And of course all the many descriptions that people have imagined that they were involved with, and by having a name that they thought that they were actually up to something other than being a member of a new club or organization. The thing is, if it were looked at for tonight on the basis of it being a kind of universal rebellion, and someone attempting to do this being looked at as a kind of universal rebel, it would still render you invisible. It would still involve you in an activity that for all intents and purposes was secret. Not to hide something, but inasmuch as all of you should know by now, if I were wanting to waste enough time that in some way we put out a big old sign, free beer and hot dogs, and got people to show up, and before they could get their free beer and hot dog, they had to listen to me talk, it would still be sort of secret. That is, most of them, the kind of people that would show up for a free beer and hot dog, at least the kind I would hope would show up, so I'd know that the world is still stable enough for us to slip by, those people would find it, at best, that what happened if I talked for a while to them, they'd find it secretive. Not that they would feel like necessarily that I was hiding something, that we were up to no good, but on the basis that it would just flow right through their ears, even if they were trying to listen, it would still remain invisible. And there is a reason. And I have never been able or took occasion to try and point specifically inside your own nervous system of why this would be in this particular way. But since I have brought up this kind of ad hoc premise for the night of this being a kind of universal rebellion, see if you can see this. The reason this kind of activity is secret, notwithstanding the fact that you could, as some of you people are doing, going out and doing something publicly, but even if we put out a big sign, it still remains a kind of secret. That is, whatever the intent is, if the general public had any occasion to hear it, it might as well be secret. It just wouldn't make any sense. It'd just be completely irrelevant, if not insane. But if I took some pains to make it appear not to be necessarily insane, it would just sound like, well, so what? What's the point of all this? And of course then I would come to my senses and have to go back to being non-ad hoc, and if I had to say anything, tell them, well, there is no purpose. Which I'd settle that, and then we could all agree, well, break out the beer and the hot dogs. So much for that. But what I started to try and turn your attention towards is this. The reason it is secret, on the basis of me describing it as potentially a kind of universal rebellion in name, the reason it is secret is that those involved would be resisting. They would be, in a more enriched manner, questioning not merely the local, fragmented specifics like everyone else, but you would be resisting what would amount to universal reality. You would be resisting, trying to investigate, trying to question. But by now some of you should understand what I mean more by resisting. Not what everybody else resists. Everybody. They don't have to be involved with an attempted form of self-help. Just everybody is resisting local, specific conditions. People standing down a bar having a beer right now. People standing at home lighting candles to some saint, not having a beer. People laying down watching TV, people standing up watching TV, people walking down the street, people not walking down the street. People who are conscious in the sense that the ordinary intelligence would have the definition of conscious to be, they are resisting. You're resisting when you think. You're resisting when you feel. You're resisting when you move about. But the resistance, when you go above the levels of just simple motor resistance, gravity, lifting weights or pushing yourself away from the table to lose weight, or in the sense of pushing on the kind of limbic blue circuit system of trying to control your emotions or suppress your anger. When you get higher up into the area that we're referring to normally as intelligence, the resistance there is specifically fragmented. Then it makes some sense, because you only resist that which seems to be worthy of resistance to you. In other words, you only resist that which you're wired up to resist. You only question, you only deny, you only attack ideas that are piecemeal. Now what? I see I'm being overwhelmed with people jumping ahead of me. Ha ha. The reason I was going to try to get you to look and see that this kind of activity is actually invisible, and for a long time even to yourself, as many of you will probably vouchsafe, is if you're not going to resist simply on the local basis, that is, what seems to be natively worthy of resistance to you, if you're just going to say, well, fuck it, I resist everything, it cannot be identified. Well, all right. No matter, we'll try it again. If you have no particular place that you are attacking on the intellectual level, in the full scope of that meaning, of everything that you resist in life, everything that you attack in life, of how dumb people are, how unthinking people are, how unfeeling people are, how unjust life is, a kind of universal rebellion that would render this, for all intents and purposes, invisible to ordinary intelligence, is that you have no particular spot that you are attacking. You also have no particular place from which you are operating. That's why this doesn't really have a name. Now if, albeit at a three-dimensional hearing level, all of this is impossible. If we had the ordinary would-be beer drinkers and hot dog eaters, and they had followed in what I just said, it's simply impossible. The sentence sounds rhetorically logical, but it's impossible. How could you not have a position to operate from, or from which to operate? If that were possible, you would not even be able to talk. You wouldn't be able to say. You couldn't say, I have no position from which to operate. Because at the 3D level, you're left with those kind of old-timey, whether some of you still find them funny, they're as old as sweat, as being able to come up with verbal paradoxes and saying, well, our premise is we ain't got no premise. Ha ha. It's a fact, but it's lost in the ha ha, because 3D intelligence, the only thing it can do to that is either find it invisible, like didn't hear it, it's ridiculous, or ha ha. In the same way, you could not, operating at any ordinary level, you could not say, and it be a reflection of what you experience, you could not say that I have no position from which I operate. Well, sure you do. That position. Amongst others, you probably got more, but you at least got that one because you just identified it. And then if you were doing this all to yourself, you'd have to say, well, I got me again. But there is a reality behind that. It is not a 3D reality. You're going to have to drag in an additional dimension. It's got to be a more complex way of looking at things, is what I was now about to spring on you. It's how about throughout history? And people still do it. When I'm talking along in other ways, I even have to lapse in it as a shorthand, even if I stop and make some caveat about it. People historically and right now, and many of you still think this way, they keep trying to define two kinds of reality. And as I said, I admit, I'm aware when I do it, many times when I'm talking along some other line, I will make a kind of shorthand use, and the intent that I'm saying is not that far removed than many other people have, philosophers and just ordinary people, of saying, well, I guess there's some kind of reality, just some kind of crude reality going on here, but boy, for real intelligent people, real insightful people of some kind, there's got to be some other reality. And of course those who are wired up to have such interest, they believe that all these kind of would-be spiritual teachers in the past that the Buddhas were talking about some other reality. There's a Hindu scriptures and all sorts of things, all the way down to Christianity. And whatever the latest guru is, of saying, all right, we've got this life, and we got this reality, but it's some kind of fake reality. We're dealing here with a Kmart reality. We're dealing with a Kmart, with the reality of the uninitiated. And then all of us chosen ones, or all of us that know the secret, then we're dealing with this other reality. Right, all of you know that. You run across that consistently. And it is in your own wiring system. It's not something that was conjured up by the environs of your life. It's not something that humans invented. It is in the basic wiring system, this continuing historic suspicion, as long as men have had an intellect talking, that there's got to be some other reality, whatever they call it. That's what they're talking about. That there is this life, and then there's something else. First off, I ask you right quick, I'll take another sip. To what end is things wired up that people accept that? That people, many people, are made to say and to state that, and even try to set up some kind of systematic investigation or theories regarding it. And those who don't say it, there's still a sizable number of people in life's body that will hear that and hear it used and nod right along. They're wired up to go, yeah, yeah. Even if they don't know what. They are wired up to respond to that, all right, there's this life. There's a kind of life, the ordinary rat race we all deal with. But by God, there's some kind of other reality. Many people, of course, nowadays, and the generations for the last couple, fooled around with enough of the so-called psychedelic goodies that there are many people now say, yeah, well, maybe I only smoked pot a couple of times, or ate a few mushrooms and go, yeah, I don't do it anymore, but there's no doubt the time I did it and the circumstance, it made me see. There's no doubt there's some kind of other reality possible going on. To what ends has life got people wired up that they will accept that? And of course, many people take it to be very serious. And many people that would think, if they just heard something I'd said, they might think, well, this is the very thing that, this is the kind of activity that deals with the great division. I'm sure it's just based on the premise that, hey, the reality we're dealing with, is just garbage. It's a real dull reality, or it's real evil, it's real stupid, and what we got to do is get to the real reality. What I was going to do was, at least for tonight, and I may use it for a while longer, we'll see, rather than say, and rather than have to piecemeal do this, the description I started out using with the universal rebellion is better. It's to say that there is a local reality and there is a universal reality. Now, I'm getting closer, not just verbally, it's no great thanks to me, but there's enough of you, and times are now such that there are enough people wired up and life keeps cruising right along, that enough people can begin to see such as this, see it in their own way, that there is a local reality that there's nothing wrong with. The local reality is whatever your reality is. And your reality, you didn't invent it. If you still believe that, and your parents didn't invent it through their environmental impact on you, if you still believe that, of course, you're wasting your time here. Rather than perhaps it titillates your brain chemistry at times, but you're not really doing anything. Local reality, for all intents and purposes, is the reality. Although life has, as I pointed out, people wired up in such a way that many people will deny that that's all the reality there is. There's got to be more, even if they can't find it, or even if it costs too much to get enough drugs and it takes them out of work too long they can't do it. People are wired up to accept the fact, when they hear it, if they don't think about themselves, that this is not the only reality. Contraire. For all intents and purposes, local reality, whatever reality is to you, just forget where it came from right now. That is reality. The rest of it is dreams. That, well, there's some kind of other great reality, or I'll find some kind of mystical way, or I'll chant, or I'll take some kind of self-help course, or I'll find a new drug that does not have any hangover effects, and I'll break through to some other reality. For all intents and purposes, for just almost all humans alive at all times, local reality is it. Notwithstanding the fact that they're wired up to dream about, to accept the fact, to suspect, it's just down in the genetic pool, that there is another reality. There's something additional, that this is not it. And I'm not talking about just life after death, or your father's ideas of gods and heavens and paradise floating up just beyond the realm of Neptune, which I guess is open to some question now. Not really. Local reality also, is kind of a side note, is the kind of thing that people go through, without using, of course, my term, of the kind of arguing. It's just all the way from a low level to a hysterical kind of arguing, a kind of verbal and emotional push and pull that's necessary for life that people go through, whether they use my terms or not, of arguing. Such as lovers. And the guy says, why don't you ever treat me in such and such way? And the woman, it doesn't matter, you can reverse all this. And she says, what the hell are you talking about? I do treat you that way. No, you don't. Now, if they cared to verbalize it, and I'm sure that this has happened, at least accidentally, if people said it this way, that the guy would say, you know what, it's like we're operating in two different worlds, or it's like we're operating at two different levels of reality. And maybe you grab the other person's face, if you're this kind of melodramatic person, you look in their eyes, and you look in their eyes and you say, are you sober? Are you on drugs? And they go, no. You look in their eyes, you think, well, what is it going on in there? You seem relatively sane until we get to something like this, and you don't even understand what reality is. All right, the person is saying, without knowing it, they're admitting, they're stating outright that there is local reality. But what they're doing is saying, my reality is correct, and yours, to say the very least, is lacking. That your reality is out of sync with real reality. That's it, real reality. All of that, but now I've put it to you enough ways, enough of you seen it, you understand that that is the normal state of human affairs. It's not good, it's not bad, until you can see that it's very good, because it shows that life is healthy. It cannot be otherwise. And nobody's right, nobody's wrong. Not from some relativist view, because there is no right and wrong in growth. The local reality is what everyone is dealing with while suspecting, while being made at the genetic, the subvocal level, to suspect that there is something else. The something else is tomorrow. The something else is the continued expansion genetically of life. Local reality is what seems to be all sentences with periods. It is what seems to be all even ephemeral satisfaction when you state, well, I'll tell you the kind of guy I am. I'll tell you what I think. I'll tell you what I believe. You have reestablished, as though it needed it, but you have reestablished, you have reconfirmed, you have gone back and pissed at the right place in your territory. You have reestablished your local reality. And of course, from all ordinary views, there is nothing wrong with this, and you would not see it as being a legitimate attack on you. If you heard me say this and you're ordinary and you took it as an attack of me saying, well, all you've done is reestablish your own local reality. And if you were ordinary and you heard this, you would very likely say, well, that's your reality. That's your opinion. What you're inferring is that my reality is some way prejudicial, probably lacking, provincial, if not chauvinistic in its scope. And if I was dumb enough, I'd go, yeah. But it's not. It is not an attack, but it is a fact that you have got to see that there is no, if you're going to attempt to travel, if you're going to attempt to explore and rebel, if you're going to attempt to pursue whatever it is that spurred you into this and brought you here, you have got to see that there is no such thing as acceptable local reality. But again, we're at the point that the sounds that travel through the 3D spectrum, and if that's all you're listening with, I got to admit, although it's not true, but I got to admit that words are inadequate again. Because it's not that anybody's 3D reality is wrong. There is nothing to go back and change in your conception of reality if you're going to pursue this. To me, to try and draw these kind of metonymies again, Columbus taking off to discover the new world, what is to be gained that there he is ready to go out, discover brand new territories. Remember, not just the Western Hemisphere, his northern hemisphere. How would you consider that to be a sane, a reasonable part of the scenario if here he is ready to go and he says, well, wait a minute. Me forgetting again what city you sail from. I'm just going to make up Barcelona. Don't write me. I'm not a historian. Let's assume it's Barcelona. Is that a seaport? At any rate. But he's ready to sail. Would you, in any way, can you find this parallel? Why would he say, well, wait a minute. I'm not going to sail off until I go back downtown Barcelona, or at least I go back to the court, Ferdinand and Isabel, and we got to get that place cleaned up. I want to get the windows done, the drapery done, the floor above. I want that place just right, to suit me before I sail off. Now, you all laugh. Do you find the parallel at all? And that doesn't begin to cover it. It is that there is nothing wrong with the old world. That is your old reality. Yours or anybody's. It's not right or wrong when I say that it is impertinent, that it's fragmented, that it is not reality. But there is nothing, there's no way to go back and fix it. If there was, it would be this. I assume that you'll see the folly of this if it were possible in the 3D world. If you're going to try and straighten up the old country, the old world, old intelligence before you took off, that is, if you were going to try and actually do something with local reality, then here's what you'd have to do. Let's assume that everybody on this planet, 5.5 billion people, or whatever it is, you're going to have to trust me, which is no big deal for this example. But there are more or less 5.5 billion local realities. All right? Here's what you'd have to do. You, in some way, I can describe it in several manners, you would have to go and collect, in some way yourself, all of these 5.5 billion local realities, and go, yeah. You'd have to eat them all, you'd have to take them all, then you would have accomplished something. Because then what it would amount to is then you would have, at least at our level, you would have universal reality. Do you follow? Because no other human's local. That is, no other nervous system that thinks and talks. Life has not put in any particular human, any human, one piece of local reality that is superior to somebody else's piece. The whole point of there being local reality so that there is this apparent conflict, this clash, the kind of energy transfer and transformation that makes life grow, specifically intellectually, specifically through man. So you surely understand by now what I'm pointing at. No one's, a pope, your mother, a rabbi, the person next to you, a friend of yours, someone you consider a nemesis, strangers, friends, no one's piece of local reality. Life has not wired up anyone, has not given anyone their own perception of reality that is superior to yours, nor is it inferior. It's just moot if you're going to try to travel. Because to try to travel, if you're really traveling, requires that you leave your demarcation point. Not take it with you, or not stop and say, wait, I can't go until the place is cleaned up. Hell, well, you could say part of the purpose of going somewhere is, hell, I'll never have to worry about cleaning this place again. Because if you get good enough to do that, you realize that it never stays clean. You can't ever get it clean. Here it comes 5 o'clock and you try to straighten up your desk, and what happens? By the time you get all the papers in the drawer and the gem clips put away, and you look around to see if it's really time to go, and you look back, and what's happened? There's at least dust on your desk. Somebody's dropped another paper. You cannot keep it clean. Local reality cannot be properly situated. That's the nature of local reality. That it is fragmented. Being fragmented, it is always going to be, apparently, in a state of agitation. That is, no matter what your reality is, all you got to do is almost step out your door. You don't have to go looking for trouble. If you're going to state your version of reality, your local reality, I mean, suddenly you're just watching the news, and they state something about the current situation in Lebanon, and you suddenly think, I've had enough. And you stick your head out the window, and you say, we're just bombed Lebanon off the map. All you got to do, assuming there's 2 or 3 people will hear you, you don't have to look for trouble, because somebody's going to come up and say, sir, I'm not sure why, but I resent that. You're wrong. You should know that by now. And you can say, well, why? Are you Lebanese? No. Do you know anybody in Lebanon? No. You don't even look American. Do you care? Well, no. But you can count on the fact that's the way life is wired up. You can still be assured of its continuing health. Whatever you state as your local reality, somebody will object to it. It cannot be straightened out. It is not superior. It is not inferior. But you are not in any state of travel. If your feeling is, if you're still tied as you should be back to the dock, if you're still tied through memory with the actual place of, or the source of, your funding to go. That is, I am going back to the court and I'm going to have to set up certain requirements of good King and Queen Ferdinand and Isabel. They're going to have to really promise me that they're going to do certain things here or straighten up the place before I'll go. I just won't go unless they promise it. Well, that's safe enough. So you're never going to go. That I cannot leave until I've got everything done. There are all kinds of examples. As always, life is talking in a certain way. There's grand old ordinary stories of people that, yes, I've hated being a banker. What I'm going to do is buy me some of those good Banana Republic clothes, and I'm going to go off and tramp up and down the mountains of Patagonia, because I believe there's probably more wise men down there than there are in Tibet anymore. I bet they all moved. And I'll do it just as soon as the kids grow up, get through college, well, and plus, of course, get through the doctoral program, because I assume all my children will become doctors, or at least dentists. And as soon as they do that, and let's see, and as soon as my wife is through menopause and calmed down so that she won't mind me leaving her. Well, you know by now, or you people out there on tape should know, I'll tell you, this is not any sort of sarcastic attack on the sociological ramifications and operations of the great middle class of the world. It's always been thusly, that I will do something great. I'll go off and live a spiritual life when I'm 65. When I've retired and I've got a nest egg and I'm probably impotent and no longer horny, and I'm probably already overweight and it doesn't matter, I just go join up with some group somewhere and I'll live a spiritual, contemplative life. It's always that once things get arranged here better on my home planet, back in my home port, that is, in my local reality, when things get just right, I'll take off. And what they're saying is I'm going to then take off and in some way abandon, or at least transcend partially, the limits of local reality. I'll become something greater than I am. The something greater that they are that life wires people up to imagine is I will escape the provincial limits of local reality. There's another good old term that comes to mind that people are forced to use by life, and they believe life makes them think that it even has more ramifications than it does through experience, and that is the idea of an open mind. That the world's quite full of people that are not involved in anything extraordinary who support the idea, who continue to talk about, well, what you need is an open mind. That's the sort of thing that will lead you into better, more profitable actions. It can increase your intellectual horizons, make you a better person, and etc. When you're dealing with the gravity of your home planet, of Earth, the open mind is seriously lacking in a specific respect. Even if you attempted to have an open mind and you're still operating at Earth level intelligence, the problem is there's going to be a limited range of options presented, even if you were capable of having something resembling, quote, an open mind. That is, in some way, if you could expand your current ability to intake information. That if in some way, literally, you could take your brain and you could open it and say, all right now I am not as tied up with my normal assumptions, automatic mental associations, that in some way I have shaken the chemistry of my brain, and right now I'm sort of idling, I'm sort of on the alert, and I'm ready. If that indeed, and that's more or less what life has made people conceive of an open mind being, even if that were true and you have expanded it out and here you are, all right, send it to me. If you're still, if this was possible and you're still operating under the weight of Earth consciousness, Earth intelligence, the only thing that would be presented for your consideration would still be local reality. That the options have not changed. That which you could hear, that which you could see, that which you could apparently take in, that you could try and chew on this new information, the information is not going to be new. Even if the mind, even if the receiver, if you could take the FM band of your tuner and push it past each end, past whatever it is, the 89.9 up to the 1500s, if you could make your FM receiver, if you could work out some trick that you could push it down and up in the audio spectrum of the electromagnetic potential, you would still only get what's being sent out. You would still want to pick up the stations that you're picking up now because they're not broadcasting below the cutoff or above. The open mind would do nothing. Having an open mind, if that was possible, would not present you with the universal menu. All right, I'll leave it to you to take that. A variation of referring to it as universal rebel, if you look at it, as I started to mention, as a kind of attempted universal traveler. But a traveler in this sense, that you would not simply want to get away from Barcelona, or Birmingham, or Cherbourg, or Genoa, or wherever you were sailing from. A real universal traveler wants to get away from where? Everywhere. That kind of universal travel, you have got to want to get away from every locale. That there is no favorable, there is no interesting locales, because all locales are manifestations of local reality, and vice versa if you can take it into another dimension. And so to do that kind of traveling, if you're going to do it, it cannot be selective. Or conversely, if it is selective on your part, you're not doing it. You may be sort of in one sense flickering around and diddling with your own brain and enjoy some of it. But if the idea continues for long that your sense of travel, your impression of what this kind of activity is internally, not dependent upon me or somebody else, but what it amounts to inside the chemistry of your own brain, if it is still, after a good period of time, based upon, well, I can see some of the advantages and some of this has been practical to me because I feel like I'm getting further and further away from blah, blah, blah in you. That is, I am getting better at overcoming certain of my perceived weaknesses, some of my rough points. You're not doing anything. You're not a universal traveler. You're a local traveler. You're just saying, well, I'd like to move further away from the garbage dump. I wish I lived in a better section of town. All right, I'm better than that. I don't want to live in just a better section of town. I want to get from Genoa to Venice. I want to move up in the world. That's no movement. It is no movement. That if you're going to change, if you could, your local reality or some piece of it for another local reality, for somebody else's, or even if you thought it was a new one, that you thought it up. That is not travel. That is local travel. It's no travel. If you're wanting to go specifically from some place, you're not traveling. Universal travel would be the, if you follow the connection or the parallel, would be like I referred to as the universal rebellion, is to be against, put it crudely, you got to be against everything. I just thought, I keep overlooking the great wisdom that comes out of Hollywood. Wasn't it Brando and the Outlaw? After all these years, came to me, somebody asked him in that movie, there's this gang of rebels and outlaw motorcyclists, and somebody said, what are you against? Some of the nice middle-class town folk. What are you against? And he says, what do you got? I guess we can close up for the night. That about covers it. Just go rent the video of The Wild One. That was the name of it, wasn't it? At any rate, that is, since I was about to put that crude to myself, is what jogged my little memory. A real revolutionist, in the sense I'm talking about now, but this is very crude, would have to be against everything. For those of you that can hear some of this, you understand it is not a rebellion of going out there and giving the finger to the world or your parents or the IRS, or to overtly be against life, because to be against life is to be against yourself. It's suicide. But it is intellectually. It is the limits of what life makes available to everybody. It's just a few people really get annoyed by it. But then again, you only got life to blame. They should have done a better job on you. But there are a few people, never can find the place to. I know it's here somewhere, I just can't find it. The real rebellion has to be non-selective. And if you're a little bit better, it is actually non-specific. But let's start with what you might be able to even hear through the earlobes. It has to be non-selective. It's not rebellion if you're simply against this. I don't care what this is. It may, by all middle of the bell curve, middle class impressions, be worthy of your circumstantial life, your time and place. It may be worthy of opposition. That I'm against people killing one another. Okay. You know that's not what I'm talking about. But that sort of selectivity that, well, I'm against this, no matter how acceptable, if not admirable by all ordinary views it may be, but if you're simply against this or you're against that, that's not rebellion. That's irritation. That's ordinary. You're not going anywhere. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to help you. The rebellion has to be against, once it's pointed out or once you had to think about it, it's got to be against everything. And then the everything, all you got to do is get just a little bit better than that and have your own insight. The everything that you're against is not even out there. The everything you're against is your brain's chemical reaction to the stimuli out there. That is, everything that you think about what you think happens, it has to be, well, fuck that. I'm against it. It doesn't matter for the dialogue to say, well, wait a minute. I'm not even sure that you understand what it is going on. Well, I don't care. I'm against it. Now, I repeat one more time for you people out there that some other time in some other place that first sing such as this, I'm against it as a certain kind of curious patois. Because you don't say it, and it's not really true. You're not against it, but there's no other way for me to tell you. You are not in favor, not of what's going on, and you're not against, not of what's going on. You are against your struggle, the invisible struggle that appears from all ordinary views to be useless. Your struggle is against your brain's chemical reaction to the stimuli. And it doesn't matter what the stimuli is, and it doesn't matter what the stimuli seems to stimulate in you. Favorable, unfavorable. It doesn't matter. I'm against reacting to flawed, to fragmented information. I'm sick of only getting half a beer. Who took the meat out of the hot? I'm sick of just having a bun. We've got to turn the tape over just a second. Another little sidestep, as long as I'm right here. When you get a taste on your own, not on your tongue, but the taste up here, inside of your own nervous system, I have what I mean by all these things, such as real explorers and travelers or the universal rebel. Something else should strike you. I've talked about it in many other ways. And this is far beyond the literal significance, if there appears to be any to you at this time. If there does appear to be, then there is. But another way to describe a kind of new experience as differing from old experience of dealing with local reality is, rather than feeling, as humanity as a rule does, literally now and otherwise, a feeling as though they are ill and seeking to be cured, seeking to be healed. If you can begin to escape from local reality, if you can begin to sail away, that feeling, whether it be specified verbally at all times or not, but that feeling that I am ill and I want to be cured, I'm looking for the cure, I'm looking for treatment. Cure would be better. Once you can break away from the dock, once you can begin to sail away from the old world, once you can begin to understand on your own what I mean, that rebellion has got to be universal, it cannot be selective. Once that happens, you no longer feel ill, seeking a cure, but, and this is real shaky verbally, but listen, some of you can hear it, you'll hear it anyway. It's then as though you are cured, but what you're dealing with is that the ordinary circumstantial life of man is such that it's like you're having a running battle over life's predisposition to make you ill. Which, of course, on one level, it is going to make you supremely ill finally, because it's going to go, ugh, and you're going to die. But as I said, those of you can hear it, those of you who hear anything in it right now, all the way from physical, notwithstanding deep genetic differences in all of us. If you were born with one leg, even if it was possible in some way to try and encourage the system to start growing another leg, if it was possible, it would take every ounce of energy you got, and I would suggest to you it wouldn't be worth it. It'd be cheaper to go ahead and, buy a good old aluminum leg. You'd be better off. But beyond that, the feelings that people ordinarily have, that ordinary intelligence would say to people in our day and time, that again, withstanding what would seem to you now, I guess, to be genetic ills, which should be taken care of if they can be, but beyond that, most modern, sophisticated people would say that the larger area of illness is probably psychological. The stress of being alive, trying to get ahead, trying to just tread water. But what is normally referred to, as you know what I mean, is a kind of psychological ill. That is the real ill of modern man. And they seek cures. Drugs, success, all the same, there's nothing wrong. They're supposed to. Analysis, gurus, sales seminars, having a new do. But there is a reality behind what I'm describing to you verbally. If you can start, and some of you of course have, and you know what I'm talking about, it's just never been mapped verbally, you begin to escape the weight of local reality. That is, you begin to actually experience whatever the hell this is, all right? You cease to feel ill. If you got one leg, it's not going to make your leg grow. But you cease to feel the ill that humanity as a whole has always felt. Even before they had the term rat race and yuppie syndrome, people have always felt that way. They used to describe it sometimes as sin, the wages of sin. Of course, they're referring to the wages of being born. And they all kept wanting to say, well, who can I tell that I would like to skip this week's payday? And they could never do it. You get paid whether you deserved it or not. You get paid whether you wanted it or not. But that kind of psychological ill, in the full sense of that word, is what I mean. What seems to be ill that is singular with man. So whether you were still backward enough that you thought it was some kind of spiritual ailment, the singular ill to man that has to do with the fact that he's got a nervous system developed far enough individually that he has a brain chemistry going on, and he is, as they call it, conscious. He can speak. Everybody feels ill to varying degrees of intensity, and they all feel as though the part of life is to seek a cure. When you begin to get free from that, conversely, you no longer feel ill in that sense. You feel well. And it's not that the ill's been cured. It's not that. And when you sailed off from Barcelona didn't suddenly, after you sailed away, went, well, let's straighten up here and do things like we should. Barcelona is still Barcelona. The old world has not changed when you leave it. The parts of your nervous system, the way you're already wired up, do not change just because you begin to wander further and further away from the city. So it's not that you've cured what you thought used to be your ills, but you're now in a state that you no longer feel ill. But then the awareness is more like this, and it is not in some way prejudicial toward life, because you don't even think about it in this way, but you're aware of the fact that life has. Things are simply wired up for you and everybody else, animals, trees, so you can't take it personally unless you are really. But then you understand that there is, I tried to put it politely, there is a strong disposition of circumstantial life to make one ill. You should see that. It's nothing to be pessimistic about. It's nothing to be astounded about. You should be aware of the fact. If right now you felt completely unill, like those moments that people have, even ordinary people, just suddenly wake up in the morning or they turn around and go to the bathroom and suddenly feel so happy it almost scares them to death. God, something's wrong. Am I dying? Am I having a heart attack? Is it a flashback from my old mushroom days or something? If right now you felt unill, would you have to go seek, if you wanted to try and test it, would you have to go out and actually make effort to get something to make you psychologically stressed? No, all you have to do is you don't even have to turn on TV. You could if you really needed some outside stimuli, or the radio, or pick up a newspaper. But you just got to sit down and lap back into your ordinary level of intelligence and memory, and suddenly you remember that it's only 6 months to income tax. Or you remember that your girlfriend just left you. You remember that somebody just wrecked your car. It is simply the nature of circumstantial life that seems to predispose everyone to feel ill, to get away from local, fragmented, provincial, jingoistic, chauvinistic reality. That is your brain reaction to the stimuli of circumstantial life. To get away from that, you no longer feel ill in the sense you always did. Not that you're not going to die, and if you had a headache, that's one thing, or if you just cut your finger, it's not that, but you no longer feel mortally, psychologically ill. But then your awareness of it is that it's almost a kind of running, silly struggle. It's not worthy of much more than a brain smile. But it's there. It is like a continuing, hovering potential disease. It's like you're surrounded by this fog of malaria. That it is just life's predisposition, vis-a-vis man, for you to become ill. So it's no longer you looking for a cure. It's like to stay unill. And it's no big deal. But I do bring it up for a specific reason. To all of you in general and some of you in specific. Another part of being ill, let me put to you, as I was mentioning on an earlier taping this week, that if you're actually being intelligent, the only way to know it, as I was suggesting to you, between cracks and comments about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and other sub and superatomic examples, that the only way I was suggesting that you could even prove intelligence or to know it exists is to be exercising it. And if you were not purposefully exercising it, you weren't really exercising it. It was exercising you. It was just a treadmill running, just inner dialogue. And I point out that you have, if you're not thinking now, you're not ever going to think. You can't think later. You can't say, well, I'll pull myself together and I'll be more intelligent tomorrow. It's not possible. Which is, of course, insane at the ordinary level, because you prepare today for what you're going to do tomorrow. You practice running around the block to enter a marathon. But it won't work with thinking. If you're not thinking now, if you're not intelligent now, you ain't going to be intelligent. And I said that you had to, if you're trying to do this, continually be reestablishing, recreating your own intelligence. You have to note it for it to even be in existence. It's not true for ordinary people. It's not true for ordinary purposes. But for you to find any place to begin to step away from local reality, to push away from the dock, to sail to a new territory, you have got to note, I am intelligent. I am exercising it now. Not smart, not learned, but right now I am exercising, because when you do that, in a sense, you are recreating continually your own intelligence. And that was to bring us up to what I was saying. In a sense tonight, if you stay locally where you are, that is, if you stay with your local intelligence, that is, if you stay with your concept of local reality, and you're not recreating continually your own intelligence, this is what makes a real would-be explorer ill. Not the ordinary stresses of life, not the fact that they have gone up on the price of Benzes and Beamers another 20% and I can't afford one again. What makes somebody really attempting to do this ill is to stay local. You don't know it, but once you start this, once you're aware of the fact that, yeah, this is what I've been itching about all my life, and if it just so happens, who knows why, but that what I'm doing here seems to have just a natural affinity to what you wanted. If it just seems to, unbeknownst to anybody, that you stumbled into a restaurant and they just serving just what you wanted to eat and you didn't know it. Plus they didn't know you were coming, they didn't prepare it just for you, it was just there. If that happens, then you realize, after you've got a good taste of the food, after you've got a taste of the chemical experience in your own brain, then you understand what makes me ill is sticking around the home port. What makes me ill is to continue to take my reality, not because it's better or worse, but to take my reality, which is local, fragmented, and wasn't even mine to start with. I was just born with it. For me to take that and not take anything else, not to seek to go anywhere else, that is what makes me ill, not the pressures of life as everybody else calls it. Because well, now I can take that, it's just irrelevant. This is what makes me ill. I might suggest, I'm reminded of a good old everyday term. Everybody's heard the phrase homesick. I give you a universal rebel's conception of homesick. It's got a slightly different version. I'm sick of home. Ciao.